all, I would like to thank the organizers for providing me with this opportunity to present my work. And I'll be talking about proving the cosmic reionization using an efficient script. Before going into the details about script and other stuff, I would like to give a brief motivation behind the work. So this is a well-known picture which we all know, that this basically shows the evolution history of the universe according to the standard model of cosmology. And we have known a lot about the early cosmology dominated universe and the today's astrophysics dominated universe. And reionization is basically the joining era between these two epochs, the early cosmology dominated phase and the today's astrophysics dominated phase. We have learned a lot about reionization, but there are still a lot of unanswered questions like what the precise reionization end, the duration, how fast or slow the process was, and we are not even sure about the nature of the ionizing sources. But the advantage we have is that there are bright observational prospects spanning across a variety of wavelength ranges. To give a few examples, I have listed these, the UV luminosity functions, which will be coming from, which are already available from HST, and JWST will also give, quasar absorption spectra, CMB observations, and the well-known redshift 21 centimeter signal. And the other motivation is that we want to check the prospects of thermal history as a treasure of reionization. This idea is also not very new, but this hasn't got the required attention. So we'd like to take a look into this. And lastly, we will have all these observational data, but to correctly interpret this data, we need to have efficient and reasonably accurate models, which will include all the inhomogeneities. We know that reionization is intrinsically inhomogeneous process. And that's where the semi-numerical models come. And Girish has already introduced nicely about the semi-numerical models, or what's the pros and cons. And today I will be talking about the semi-numerical model with which I am working. But before going to that, let me tell why that semi-numerical model called script was needed. And this is due to the problem of photon number non-conservation, which is associated with the standard semi-numerical models, mainly based on excursion set-based approach. So in simple words, the photon number non-conservation means that the average number of available ionizing photons is not equal to the average number of hydrogen atoms ionized. Mathematically, if we see, this zeta multiplied with collapse fraction gives an estimate for the number of available ionizing photons per unit baryons, and this Q gives the globally average ionization fraction. So if photon number conservation is valid, then these two quantities should be equal for throughout the ionization state. But in case of excursion set-based case, what we see is this kind of bumps are coming out, and this means that photon number conservation is not valid. And to solve this problem, script was introduced. It stands for semi-numerical code for reionization with photon conservation, and it explicitly obeys this criterion. That means it explicitly photon conserving model. The algorithm is basically simple. So at first step, it assigns the ionization fraction to the each and every cell according to the ionization criterion. That is, if the available number of photons is greater than the available number of atoms, then the cell will be assigned as ionized. And at first step, it allows for the over ionization. That means a cell can have an ionization fraction of greater than 1. And in the next step, it redistributes these excess photons from these over ionized cells to the nearby cells which are yet to be ionized. So this is fine, but not only that, this photon number conservation has a further consequences which may be critical. And that is, it provides the large scale convergence of power spectra with respect to the resolution. So this is going to be an future probe, so this can be important if we do not, if we want to check the prospects of 21 centimeter power spectra as an example. Now I will move to my work. So with this semi-numerical model, I have checked a variety of effects which can be important during reionization. The first one is the thermal evolution of IG. We know that during reionization, it's not only the ionization, but the medium also heats up. And to model that, we need to basically solve this standard first order differential equation. The first term is the different astrophysical heating and cooling. The second one is the cooling due to the expansion of the universe, and the third one is the heating and cooling depending on the structure formation. To model the reionization heating, we need to introduce a free parameter which gives the temperature increment of a cell which goes from a fully neutral to fully ionized state. The next one is the inhomogeneous recombination, and recombination is also basically an opposite effect of ionization, as we know. And to compute the recombination number density, we need to track the density evolution and the ionization history of each and every cell in our simulation box. And again, we need to introduce a free parameter called clumping factor, which basically gives how inhomogeneous the medium is or the strength of the recombination. And lastly, we also study another effect which basically the consequence of ionization heating, that is the radiative feedback. So as the temperature heats up, the lower mass halos cannot sustain the heated up gas, and as a result of that, there will be inefficient star formation in these lower mass halos due to this excess radiation, and which will in turn affect the reionization process in a negative way. So this needs to be included in the model, and in general it is modeled with a minimum threshold mass which is temperature dependent. So if we are able to compute the temperature, then we automatically model the radiative feedback. Now I will go straight to some of the results. So in this plot I have shown the light cones for 3 different cases. So the first one is the fiducial, where we include both recombination and feedback. In the middle we do not include feedback. We see that recombination is ending, reionization is ending a bit early, and if we neither include recombination nor feedback, it's ending much earlier. So both recombination and feedback delay the reionization end, shifting it towards lower redshift. This is kind of expected because both the effects basically the opposite effect of reionization. Now we move to the observational probes which we can compute from our models, and this is the temperature of low density IgM, and the main focus in this plot is that there are already some observations available around redshift 5 and 6, and we can see that we can rule out this extreme kind of models where the temperature is very large. So in principle, this can be a potential probe of the late phase of the reionization. The next one is well known, and Girish has also talked about this one, the UV luminosity function of galaxies. This is basically the estimate of number densities of galaxies per unit luminosity or magnitude means. And the main important effect here is that if we concentrate in this cyan line, there is no feedback effect, but if we include the feedback, there is a suppression at the faintment. And why is it happening? Because the lower mass halos mainly will be affected by the radiative feedback, and lower mass corresponds to the fainter end of magnitude bins, and as a result of that there is a suppression. And right now the error bars are much larger, but it is expected that JWST will reduce these error bars and we can constrain the models from there. And the well known one, the 21 centimeter power spectra, and here the main effect is that if we concentrate on the bottom panel, that if we do not include the radiative feedback or recombination, the peak of the amplitude is a bit larger, and as a result of the recombination and feedback, there is a suppression at the peak of the amplitude for 21 centimeter power spectra. Now we will have these probes. How can we constrain the reionization era using these observational data which are already available? So to remind that we have mainly 5 free parameters: ionizing efficiency, which can be modeled with this normalization factor zeta naught, which is basically the ionizing efficiency at redshift 9. Alpha gives the redshift evolution, and we also assume a escape fraction, that is the fraction of photons which are able to escape from the halos to ionize the IgM. And for the escape fraction, we assumed a mass dependent escape fraction, where if escape naught is the value of escape fraction for a halo of mass 10 to the power 9 solar mass, and beta gives the index on mass. And I have already introduced the reionization temperature increment. And we have used all these observational constants, the model invariant constants on global ionization fraction, CMB scattering optical depth, luminosity functions at 2 redshifts, and we have also included this one. This is the new observational probe which we think the low density IgM temperature estimates, and we also assume that reionization is N by redshift 5.3 or so. And what's the result? So you can clearly see that all the model parameters are reasonably well constrained with the available data, and we are able to give constraints on some of the derived parameters like the midpoint of the reionization, the duration of the reionization, and so. And the main point is to highlight that what's the effect of including that temperature data. And this is the plot. So the default model where we include the temperature constant, and this orange one where we do not include the temperature data. And clearly it can be seen that if we include the temperature data, parameter constraints are much more improved. And this TRE parameter, which is very sensitive to the temperature, and clearly this parameter is very well constrained if we include the temperature at low density regime constraints. And the constraints also improve for the other derived parameters too. And why is this happening? Because you can see that if we plot 200 random samples, you can see that there are a lot of orange models which can be clearly discarded if we include these data points. So in principle, the low density regime temperature data can be an important probe for the late phase of the reionization. And now I will move to my last project, which I am currently doing, that prospects of 21 centimeter power spectra as a tracer of reionization. And to do that, we start with a simplistic model where we do not include any kind of recombination or feedback effect. So at the moment we have just two free parameters, the ionizing efficiency and the minimum threshold mass, above which a halo can collapse and from stars and stuff. And script will provide this kind of basically ionization map to give an example. And here is the approach is that we will generate mock data using script and try to recover the on top of that we will add the noise from realistic SK observation, and we will try to recover the input models. And we will check independently for the photon conserving model, which script provides, and the standard excursion set based approach. And what we find is that this is a typical plot for the Redshift 7, and the left one is for the photon conserving case. So we have generated the data using the highest resolution, that is 2H inverse per megaparsec, and try to recover the input parameters for the default high resolution and with a coarser resolution. And we find that the photon conserving case can recover the input parameters quite well. This dash line are the input which have been gone into the generation of mock. And if we check for the excursion set based case, we see that the coarser resolution one, that is the red curves, are not providing good results. And this can be the effect of photon number non-conservation. So with a realistic noise of 1000 hours of observation of SK, the excursion set based models can provide inaccurate interpretation. And next I move to the most realistic data, including inhomogeneous recombination and feedback, but unfortunately the full model with high resolution cannot be run because the lack of the computational efficiency. So we need to take a simplistic approach to include these physical effects within a single redshift snapshot without evolving the full ionization history. And to do that, we have developed a toy feedback model where instead of one minimum threshold mass, we use two, one for the neutral regime, another for the ionized regime. And for ionized regime, we suppress the ionizing efficiency with proper weight factor according to the ionization fraction. And this is basically the photon conserving criterion, and from this equation we can derive this Q and plug it into this equation. So in principle, in a simplistic manner, feedback can be modeled. And we also use mean free path based recombination, which was provided in this study by Davis and Fulanetto. And this basically modifying the ionization criteria a bit, where lambda is the mean free path. So clearly if lambda is infinite, then this will go to 1, the standard one, and if lambda is small, then means that there is recombination. So by tuning lambda, we can in principle model the recombination. And this is the plot. Here we can see that the astrophysical recovery for astrophysical parameters are not that good, that's true, but you can still get the ionization state accurate. So this is the advantage at the moment, but obviously we require faster way to check with the full model. And I like to conclude here that we have at first project we have probed the thermal and ionization history of the universe. We have checked the effect of radiative feedback and inhomogeneous recombination on a variety of observables. We also use the low density IGM temperature estimates as a potential probe of reionization. And next we have also constrained the reionization era using the available observation, and we check that our model prefers late reionization range. And lastly, I am currently studying the prospects of 21 centimeter power spectra as a tracer of reionization, and we find that photon number conservation can play a crucial role to correctly interpret the data. So thank you. I would like to stop here.
Thanks, Barun. Questions for Barun? Krish? I was wondering, have you tried to look at the evolution of the ionizing photon production rate, the average ionizing photon production density as a function of redshift in these models?
The gamma you were telling,
not the gamma, but the n dot.
N dot, yeah. I guess I had a plot.
Sorry.
So I can show you. Yes, so this is the n dot for the default model, and these are the.
Okay, so this looks very different from other models.
Yes.
That might be something worth understanding.
Yes.
Then. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
I have a question about your. You addressed an issue where you check whether you can recover the parameters of your simulation. So you work with the power spectrum, right?
Yes.
And two different simulations predict two different power spectra, isn't it? Or
true.
And for each of them, you take the corresponding power spectra and you do the analysis.
Exactly.
So what is the difficulty? Why does one work and other one doesn't work?
So this is the case where we have used the photon conservation model, photon conserving model, and the mock is generated with the highest resolution, and we try to recover for two resolution using the default one, the highest one, by which the data is generated, and with a coarser resolution. So in this case it works because photon conservation provides the large scale convergence, but if we do for the excursion set based case, and again we do the similar stuff, we find that the recovery is reasonable if we use at least the highest resolution case, the resolution with which the data is generated, but it fails to do for the coarser resolution. And that is happening because the non-conservation provides the non-convergence to the large scale power spectra, and that's the reason it's showing this kind of behavior.
You have a power spectra which your model predicts, right?
Exactly.
And when it is observed, you observe the same thing.
Yes.
So where is the problem? So the dependence on the parameter is the problem, is it?
So the data is generated with the highest resolution, and if we recover with it, we try to recover it with another resolution, so coarser resolution.
Okay. So you are not. So for your recovery, you are using a different set of simulation.
Exactly. So this.
Okay.
And seed is also different.
Okay, thank you.
Obviously, because we don't know the what's the seed of real universe. So that's the thing.
Yeah, sure. On that note, this difference that you are showing here, how does this result change in your mean free path dependent ionization threshold computation? Have you looked at that?
This one?
Um, yeah, so maybe that one. So I guess the question I'm trying to ask is, when you have this mean free path, will the result be resolution dependent in that case?
Yes, so in that case there is resolution dependent, but yes, that's what I was telling, that the recovery is good at least for the globally average ionization state. You can see that both the resolutions are giving reasonably accurate result, but yes, for the astrophysical parameters the recovery is not good, because we have anyway taken a very simplistic model to recover.
Small query: is photon is conserved in the real scenario? I mean,
It should be a physical process. So
no. In the real universe, is photon conserved? I mean, in the data you are conserving, you are maintaining the symmetry and getting the convergences. Huh.
Yes.
But in the real scenario, is photon is conserved?
Yes, photon number should be conserved. It somehow can be channeled through a different mode, but the total number of photons should be converted. I mean, it cannot vanish in a particular way. So
Right. Okay.
Okay, so if there are no more questions, let's thank Barun.